Good morning, one and all. Myself, Dr. Rupa, consultant in obstetrics and gynecology, Hyderabad. Today, we are going to discuss some of the investigations of the female partner in case of infertility. Okay, it's a very big topic. We can't finish it in 5 to 10 minutes. Therefore, we'll divide the topic and we'll discuss it. Today, we'll discuss specifically about how to diagnose an ovulation. Okay, how to diagnose it. Okay, see what is for evaluation or diagnosis of ovulation. What are the important points you all have to know? That is, see, this is the ovary. First, we should know the anatomy regarding it. So, if this is a follicle, the ovum will be present here. And you all know this is the fallopian tube. Okay? And this is the uterus, cervix, vagina. Right? So, the follicle, the dominant follicle releases the ovum. This ovum travels all along the fallopian tube. It is picked up by the femoral end of the fallopian tube. This is the femoral end. Okay. See the finger-like projections. And this travels along the fallopian tube. And from here, the sperm passes and these two meet in the fallopian tube. Okay. From here it passes and these two meet in the fallopian tube. Okay. And it results in the formation of a zygote or it is a fertilized ovum. Okay, this is the mechanism. Now, for the ovulation, how we will find out that the ovulation has taken place? Okay, let us come in detail. Now, there will be direct methods and some of the indirect methods. What is this is, in case of indirect methods, first when a patient comes to the hospital, we should ask regarding her menstrual cycles, menstrual history, whether they are regular, any irregular periods because of PCOD. Okay, any premenstrual syndromes. Or any spotting in between the menstruation. Okay, we should take a detailed history regarding the menstrual history or any primary dysmenorrhea. There may be fibroids or any adenomyosis may be there. So, any primary dysmenorrhea. To rule out any causative factor. Okay, so it is indirect method. We'll ask regarding this, whether the cycles are regular or not, any irregular cycles because of PCOD or any premenstrual syndromes, any spotting in between the menstrual cycles or any primary dysmenorrhea. Next, other causes like evaluation of peripheral, peripheral or end organ. What happens is, see, first is the rise in basal body temperature. See, what happens is, after ovulation, there is rise in temperature of 0.5 to 1 degree Fahrenheit. Okay, and it falls just before the next menstrual cycle and falls just before the next menstrual cycle. So you should understand the concept here. See, this is normally this is a June month. Okay, and this is upper one is the calendar what I am showing, and this is the menstrual cycle of a woman. Okay, what happens is, see, on the 14th day, this is the 14th day. See, just before the ovulation, the temperature has decreased. Okay, it is decreased. And what happens is, after the ovulation, because of this whole condition is mostly because of the hormone progesterone. Okay, see, because of the rise in the progesterone level, see, the temperature is going on increasing. It is increasing. How much it increases? It increases by 0.5% to 1 degree Fahrenheit, and it just decreases just before the next menstrual cycle. Okay, this is the how we evaluate that the ovulation has taken place. But one disadvantage of this basal body temperature is it is a retrospective diagnosis. Okay, and sometimes the periods may be irregular. We can't find out clearly. So Evaluation of peripheral or end organ, the basal body temperature, they will be asking so many times in the examinations. The most important question what they'll be asking is the basal body temperature rises because of the which hormone, estrogen, progesterone, they'll be asking. It's mostly because of the progesterone. How much temperature will be varying means only 1 degree Fahrenheit. Okay. And is it that much helpful means no, it is just a retrospective diagnosis. And the next one is cervical mucus changes. Why the cervical mucus changes are very important? Because it depends upon two conditions, that is the physiochemical property physiochemical property of cervical mucus depend on two hormones, that is one is estrogen and the other is progesterone. See, in estrogen is about 1 to 14 days of menstrual cycle. If you take it clearly, 1 to 14 days. What happens in this, the cervical mucus will be thin, elastic, watery, and they will be fern pattern. Fern pattern can be observed. Why this fern pattern will be there? Because of the presence of sodium chloride crystals. Because presence of sodium chloride crystals, see the ferning pattern of all the cervical mucus here. They will be asking this image in the examination. This image is very, very important. What does the following image show of the cervical mucus? It's a ferning pattern because of the presence of the sodium chloride crystals. It is seen because of the estrogenic effect in first 14 days. Okay, next. The next progesterone is from, if we take clearly, it is from some 15th day, 16th day, after 14 days. That is from 15th day to next menstrual cycle. Okay, in this the cervical mucus will be very thick, rigid, viscid. See, thin means here thick, here elastic means here it will be rigid, watery means like viscid like substances it will be there, and no ferning pattern observed. No ferning pattern because progesterone causes dissolution of sodium chloride crystals. Okay, the mucus will be very thick and there is no progesterone effect, and there will be ferning pattern because of the estrogen. No ferning pattern, or because of the dissolution of the sodium chloride, there will be no ferning pattern in the progesterone period. Okay, the cervical mucus. Now this is what the questions they will be asking is, ferning pattern will be observed. Ferning pattern is absent because of the effect of progesterones. These two questions can be expected. Okay. Next, hormone estimation. In case of hormonal estimation, the first thing we will observe is serum progesterone. Okay, normally it is at the starting on day 8 like that, it is 1 nanogram per ml. But after day 21 or 22, it will be more than 5 to 6 nanogram per ml. It indicates that ovulation has taken place. See, this is the estrogen of the first 14 days. See, now the ovulation, the peak of all the hormones, that is peak. This is the ovulation period. And the last is a progesterone. Last 14 days till the next menstrual cycle is a progesterone. And next is a serum estradiol. It is increased just 24 to 36 hours before ovulation. Now, serum LH. It is of two types. LH surge will be there and LH peak will be there. LH surge is observed almost 24 hours before ovulation and it is observed 10 peak is about 10 to 12 hours before ovulation. Okay, so the timings are very important. This slide is very important in case of diagnosis of ovulation, because depending upon the timings we can predict when the ovulation is going to happen, and depending upon that we can plan for intrauterine insemination, that is IUI, IVF or ICSI. Okay, these timings are very important, and I have seen this timing periods asking that how much the surge will be there, where the peak will be there in the previous MCQs also. You have to remember it. Okay, and last is urinary LH. Urinary LH. It is done on the daily basis. Daily basis for the prediction of ovulation. Daily basis, that is in which it indicates almost 24 to 36 hours. This is done by urine. When we put the urine drops in the kidney, it will show deep blue color. Okay, deep blue color, but it is very expensive, not in use except in IVF centers. Nobody will be using it as a home kit. Okay, it is used on daily basis for the prediction of ovulation, and the ovulation occurs to 24 to 36 hours with surge of LH. Okay, so what all the questions they would be asking from this slide are, from which day the progesterone will be raised? See here, it is after 14th day, it peaks from 21st day or 22nd day, like that. These are the important questions. And when will be the LH surge? 24 hours before ovulation. LH peak 10 to 12 hours before ovulation. What is urinary LH? Means it helps in predicting when we put a urine drop on the kid, it will show the color change. Color change indicates that within 24 to 36 hours, the ovulation may takes place. Okay. And next. Now the endometrial biopsy. What is this endometrial biopsy? It is just curating the layer of the endometrium. Curating the layer of endometrium. So for curating, you should have some instruments. Now, what are these instruments? That is Charman cannula, and the second will be Pipple. Okay, see, we have introduced this curate, and now the layer which is present inside this uterus is being removed. This is known as endometrial biopsy. In case of regular menstrual cycles, curating is done on 21st to 23rd day of menstrual cycle. After 21st day, they will be doing. If there are irregular periods, curating can be done on the day of onset of menstruation. Now, see what we'll see in this endometrial biopsy. We are doing the biopsy on 21st to 23rd day. Means it should indicate the endometrial glands of secretory phase. Sometimes what happens is there will be still proliferative phase only. Then we'll see that is a hormonal imbalance which is occurring. Still the progesterone has not occurred. So no ovulation. Okay. What you will be observing is endometrial glands of the secretory phase. And the next point is we observe subnuclear vacuolation. Is an important predictor for ovulation. Okay, in this slide, what are the MCQs which are important are for regular menstrual cycles, when we'll be doing endometrial biopsy, 21st to 23rd day. It may be on 24th, 25th day also, no problem. Okay, in case of irregular periods, when you'll be doing on the day of onset of menstruation. What you will observe in this endometrial biopsy for infertility done on 21st to 23rd day is, we observe the endometrial glands of the secretory phase. What is the important predictor of ovulation in case of endometrial biopsy? It is subnuclear vacuolation. Okay. Now the next slide. Okay. Okay, let's see on ultrasound. What you will see on the ultrasound. Okay. What we'll see is for the the follicle size should be almost 18 to 20 mm. First point. Second point, rupture. Then after continuous scannings, we can see that there is rupture of the follicle. Rupture of the follicle or collapse of the follicle. Both are same. And if there is a collapse of the follicle, what we'll see? Fluid in the pouch of Douglas. Okay. Fluid in pouch of Douglas. And when we measure the endometrial thickness, it will be greater than 8 mm. Very good for implantation. Good for implantation. Size of the follicle should be 18 to 20 mm. Okay. So on doing repeated scans, there should be this 18 to 20 mm should be ruptured or collapsed. Because of this rupture, the fluid will be fluid in the pouch of Douglas. And next, the endometrial thickness of greater than 8 mm is very good for implantation. See, what I want to show in this image is, see, this is the uterus. In the image, the uterus will be seen like this. And this is that is the endometrial thickness what we are going to measure. Okay, see, this is the ovary. Ovary with this red one are all the follicles. Okay, as this is on day 5, 6, 7 like that. Coming on day 12, day 13, what happens is there will be only one dominant follicle. See this. This is the one dominant follicle. Okay, one dominant follicle. This is the uterus. See, the endometrium thickness is increasing. See, now the endometrial thickness is now far increased. And now what happened is, see, after the ovulation has occurred, this is the corpus luteum. Okay, these are the ultrasound scans. Now you can't understand it that much clearly, but if you understand it, it is better. See, this is the uterus with endometrial thickness. As the day passes, see, the endometrial thickness layer is increasing. Okay, it is going on increasing. Initially, there will be more follicles in the ovary, but later on, only one dominant follicle will be there. And last, after ovulation, there will be corpus luteum also. Okay. Last is the laparoscopy. Now, what we'll see in the laparoscopy? Nothing. It is a direct visualization. When you put a scope into the abdomen or pelvic cavity and see, we can see direct visualization of what is happening in the ovulation time. Direct visualization. First one. We'll see. See, this is the ovum which is releasing from the follicle. Okay, this is the ovum which is releasing from the follicle. So, what we'll see? Direct process of ovulation can be seen. Direct process of ovulation can be seen, and we can see the activity of the corpus luteum also. See, a small thing it is being ejected, little bigger, then bigger. It is completely outside. Okay, this will be picked up by the femoral end of the fallopian tube. Okay, this is a direct visualization. We can see the ovulation process, release of the ovum from the follicle, and next the activity of the corpus luteum can also be seen. Okay, they'll be asking what are the indirect methods of ovulation and what are the direct methods. In case of direct methods, only one method is there, that is laparoscopy. That is because of direct visualization. Okay, so I think we came to the end of the topic. And as it is very big topic, I have ended only with the diagnosis of ovulation. Okay, now we'll go with the other topic in the next coming video. Okay, I think you all understood it. And okay, let us meet in the next topic. Thank you.